In 1918, as the Great War raged on relentlessly, somewhere over the skies of the Western Front, a young Indian pilot was diving out of the clouds, chasing a formation of German fighters. His guns were blazing, his movements were sharp, deliberate, and unnaturally skilled. His fire was precise, perfect even, and in just 14 days, he will shoot down 9 enemy aircrafts. Even the most experienced pilots of the Royal Air Force, men who had seen the very best and the very worst of the aerial combat, were in praise of this young Indian gentleman. Indra Lal Roy has come to be remembered as India's first and only flying ace. He has attained an almost mythic stature. Tales of his bravery, courage, and audacity still echoes the walls of the Air Force Academy, inspiring the next generation of pilots. What we remember today is the outcome and not the road that led to it. His challenges came early and they came often. Yet, after each fall, he returned stronger than ever, paving the way for his future greatness. His heroics in 1918 were a culmination of his whole life, and to understand it, we must go back to the very beginning. The Roy family's roots lie in the bustling city of Calcutta. The city in the late 19th century was already a thriving hub of commerce, influence, and ambition. As the capital of British India, the city had become a center of power and prosperity. The Roy family fit well into this setting. Dr. Suraj Kumar, Indra Lal's maternal grandfather, was one of the first Indians to be trained in Western medicine, while his father, Pierre Lal Roy, was a distinguished barrister. His mother, Lolita Roy, was a prominent social reformer fighting for women's suffrage in Britain and in India. She has often been described as one of the most emancipated of Indian women. Pierre Lal Roy and Lolita Roy were parents to 6 children, and among them, near the end of that line, was Indra Lal, the second youngest, born on a cold winter day in December of 1898. In 1901, the Roy family migrated to London. London, back then, was the center of the entire British Empire. The world was changing rapidly, and London was leading the charge. It was a city alive with innovation, driven by breakthroughs in technology, booming industries, powerful financial institutions, and an ever-increasing network of railways. For families like the Roys, educated, ambitious, and closely connected to the institutions of the empire, London provided access to opportunity, influence, and prestige. This new world, however, often required adjustments. As was often the case in Anglo-Indian circles of the time, Indian names were reshaped to fit British sensibilities, and so Indra Lal came to be affectionately known as Laddie by his mother. This nickname stuck well into his ears in the Royal Flying Corps and the Royal Air Force. From an early age, Roy showed a natural aptitude for academics. It was this ability that earned him a place at the renowned St. Paul's School in Hammersmith, one of the most prestigious institutions of its time. For Indians to gain admission into such school was no small feat. The same institution had shaped figures like Sir Aurobindo Ghosh, and now Roy was walking those very halls. Roy was still at St. Paul's in 1914 when the world descended into war. Like many of his peers, he watched as those ahead of him graduated and left for the front. The war seemed to demand something from everyone, and Roy was not the kind to be left behind. He wanted to contribute in any way possible, and going to the front was not. So he poured himself into academics, and his technical knowledge started to take a more practical shape. He showed an early aptitude for the technical side of warfare, going so far as to design a trench mortar and submitted the plans to the War Office. By all accounts, his brilliance did not go unnoticed, and his path was already laid out. A scholarship to Oxford awaited him. Even a distinguished legal career, much like his father's, was well within his reach. But Roy was not really drawn to the quaint lifestyle of the rich household he grew up in. In 1914, when his elder brother Paresh Lal left St. Paul's and became the first ever Indian to join the British Artillery Division, Roy saw a life that carried meaning beyond the ordinary. While his brother saw the war unfolding on the ground, Roy was drawn to the very different dimension of it. His growing technical curiosity, combined with the rapid advancements in aviation, drew him to the idea of becoming a pilot. By the time Roy turned 18, his decision was already made. If he was to serve in the war, it would be in the air. He was determined to join the Royal Flying Corps. The first challenge in his journey to greatness was to present itself soon after he applied to the RFC. His initial application was rejected on medical grounds. claiming that his defective eyesight makes him unfit for service in the RFC. Roy's career could have ended right there. For many like him, such a rejection was a point of resignation, a signal to choose a different path. But Roy was not like others. He was not ready to accept a conclusion that would hinder his aspirations. Roy was determined to challenge the verdict. For him, a mere piece of paper was not going to define his future. He wanted a second opinion from the best of the best. But obtaining an independent medical assessment, especially one that could stand against the judgment of a military board, came at a cost that he could not readily afford. But for Roy, what he sought to achieve held a far greater weight than any of his material possessions. So, to pay for the rather costly consultation, he sold his motorcycle. The second examination confirmed what he had believed all along. Armed with a favourable report, he appealed the earlier decision and joined the Royal Flying Corps for flying training on April 4, 1917. A few months later, on 5th July 1917, he was commissioned as second lieutenant. On October 30, he joined active service with No. 56 Squadron that operated the Royal Aircraft Factory SE-5A, a nimble biplane later described as the Spitfire of World War I. Though Roy's training was sufficient to qualify him for service, it was still severely limited. But the demands of war are unrelenting, and like many others, Roy soon found himself in active combat. He was learning and was trying to refine his instincts in the air. He was still not the pilot he would later become. In those early months, there was little to distinguish him from the many others around him. His performances were steady but unremarkable. His maneuvers lacked the sharpness that combat required, and his experience was too limited to give him a decisive edge. He was, in every sense, a young and relatively inexperienced pilot doing his duty as instructed. But combat rarely leaves any space for mistakes, and on 6 December 1917, one such mistake led to Roy being shot down by a German Fokker D-7 over France. The crash was so violent that Roy was pulled from the wreckage unconscious and was later declared dead by the medical staff. His body was taken to a hospital morgue and laid among the fallen. His body may have been bruised, but his spirit was not broken. Miraculously, Roy regained consciousness. He was disoriented, severely injured, but alive nonetheless. In every practical sense, Roy had been given a second life. Roy had been born again. Roy did not take well to life away from the skies. For him, recovery was a period of frustration. He felt confined by his injuries and was eager to return to the action quickly. Idleness was not in his nature. Even as he remained grounded, his mind stayed engaged. His earlier inclination towards technical understanding resurfaced, now sharpened by his experience as a pilot. He began to sketch aircraft designs of his own. His first-hand experience as a pilot and theoretical knowledge came in handy as he worked on these designs. Some of these sketches can now be found in the Indian Air Force Museum in Delhi. When he eventually returned to duty after several months, it was not the return he had hoped for. To his disappointment, the Royal Flying Corps assigned him as an equipment officer, keeping him firmly on the ground. Yet, as before, Roy was not prepared to accept this as his fate. He persistently demonstrated his fitness and was determined to prove that he was capable of flying again. At the same time, the realities of war began to weigh in his favor. The demand for pilots was ever increasing, and the margin for caution was narrowing. In time, both his persistence and circumstances aligned, and Roy was declared medically fit and cleared to return to flying duties. After a brief period of refresher training to regain his proficiency in flying, Roy was posted to No. 40 Squadron on 19th June 1918, which was then stationed in France. There, under the command of Captain George McElroy, his performance underwent a notable transformation. It was as if his rebirth had transformed him from an ordinary pilot to a formidable one. It took Roy a few days to find his rhythm, but as he settled back into the cockpit of the SE-5A, it became increasingly clear that the pilot who returned to France was no longer a reckless teenager, but a focused and lethal hunter. In a staggering display of aerial prowess, Roy secured 9 confirmed victories in a window of just over 2 weeks, with just 170 hours of flying time. On July 6, 1918, he downed a German Hanover C 2-seater and claimed his first victory. 2 days later, on July 8th, Roy pushed the limits of his SE-5A aircraft. The engine of his SE-5A roared as it climbed, cutting through the cold air. He was in pursuit of a Fokker D-7, a formidable German aircraft, widely regarded as one of the finest aircrafts of the war. The Fokker turned to engage, confident in its own capabilities. It was, in fact, the superior of the two aircrafts. With its higher rate of climb, excellent high altitude performance, and stability, its pilots had a decisive edge in combat, outmatching aircrafts like the SE-5A being flown by Roy. Roy, however, was a very different pilot than the one who had been shot down by another Fokker D-7 the previous year. On the morning of July 8, he recorded 3 victories in a span of just 4 hours. By 13 July, after shooting down a FLAS D-3, he officially became a flying ace, the only Indian pilot to have 5 confirmed kills in the air. He celebrated his ace status by shooting down 2 Fokker D-7 aircrafts on July 15, a DFW CV on 18 July, and another Hanover C on 19 July. However, the high-altitude world of 1918 was a place of extreme attrition. At dawn of July 22, 1918, Roy's formation of 3 SE-5As was ambushed by a larger formation of 4 Fokker D-7 belonging to Jaster 29. In the ensuing dogfight, the British pilots managed to down 2 of the German attackers, but Roy's plane was struck and erupted in flames, going down over Caen in France. Indra Lal Roy had met an untimely end at the age of 19 at the hands of the Army Air Service of the German Empire. He was officially declared presumed dead in September and was posthumously awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, becoming the first Indian to be honored with the same. His citation, dated September 20, 1918, reads, "A very gallant and determined officer who, in 13 days, accounted for 9 enemy machines. In these several engagements, he had displayed remarkable skill and daring on more than one occasion, accounting for 2 machines in one patrol." After the war came to an end on 11 November 1918, Roy's body was eventually recovered, identified, and laid to rest at the Estavelis Communal Cemetery in France. His grave bears an inscription in both French and Bengali. It reads, "A valiant warrior's grave. Respect it. Do not touch it." Indra Lal Roy may have left his mortal soul in September of 1918, but his legacy did not end there. Inspired by Indra Lal Roy's heroics, his nephew Subrata Mukherjee would go on to become the first Indian Chief of Air Staff, carrying forward his uncle's legacy. Indra Lal Roy's life was brief, but it was never small. It reminds us that the measure of a person is not in how long they live, but in how deeply they choose to engage with the path before them. He began as an unremarkable young man, faced rejection, and endured failures. He was not born extraordinary, nor did he begin his journey as the most skilled among his peers. And yet, he chose again and again to rise above it all. His refusal to accept limits imposed him, whether by circumstance, by failure, or by others, is what truly sets him apart. In a life that lasted just 19 years, he showed that greatness is not always a matter of time, but of resolve. And perhaps that is what his story leaves us with, that even the most ordinary beginnings can lead to something truly exceptional.